what's going on in the brain, there are two theories that I think are interesting, or three. I'll see if I can quickly outline them. The one I talk about in the book is the fact that they have found, taking fMRI images of people at the height of a psychedelic experience, and can you imagine being like rolled into one of those tubes while tripping? We owe these volunteers a large debt of gratitude for their courage. They have found that what's going on in their brain during this experience is that a particular brain network called the default mode network is deactivated. Now, what is the default mode network? It connects several different brain structures, and without going into their names, that seem to be involved in the generation of the sense of self. Time travel is here, your ability to imagine the future and remember the past, which is very important, obviously, to our identity. Without a sense of the past, you disappear as a person. It's also where theory of mind takes place, our ability to imagine the mind of another, and the narrative self, the way we kind of weave what happens in our lives into the story we tell of who we are. All this is happening in that network. To the extent that you can say the ego has an address in the brain, which is oversimplifying, it's the default mode network. And what was interesting is that when volunteers describe the experience of ego dissolution, there is this sense of complete depersonalization that happens on a high dose, not always, but very often on a high dose of psychedelics. Their default mode network went quiet, and they could correlate this pretty exact, the experience and what we were seeing. Curiously enough, really experienced meditators, when put in an fMRI, people with 10,000 hours or more, they too have a deactivation. The same network goes quiet. So it could be that this muffling or quieting or temporary relief from the voice of your ego, which traps us, of course, in all these loops of rumination. I mean, that's telling that self-critical story, that story about, I'm worthless, I'm unworthy of love, I can't get through the day without a drink, whatever it is being enforced. Those bad patterns are being enforced by the ego. And it may be that having some surcease, some break from that pressure allows people to change. So that's one theory. The other theory that's more recent and has only been demonstrated in animals so far, there's a young researcher named Gül Dölen. She's Turkish, but she lives here, who has done this really interesting work with animals. And her first experiment, which you may have heard of, it got some attention, was to give MDMA to octopuses. Why octopuses? Because they're separate from us by like 40 million years or something like that. And she wanted the most different creature she could find. Octopuses are also incredibly solitary creatures. From the time they mature, they want to be left alone. They go under their rock and that's it. I don't even know how they reproduce, but they don't want to be with other octopuses. She found when she gave them MDMA and then put them in underwater with a choice of two chambers, one where they could socialize with other octopuses and the other where they could go under their rock and be solitary, for a period of weeks after the MDMA, they chose to socialize. Her hypothesis, which she's since demonstrated in several other animals using several different psychedelics, is that, well, this has been well known in psychology since the 30s. We have these critical periods in our development. So there's that critical period from ages like 2 to 4 where you can learn languages like this. You're just like really sticky, and you can even sort. You can learn multiple languages and sort them out. Or in our adolescence, we have this critical period for social learning where we just learn about how the world works and how people are. There's a critical period after stroke for about 6 weeks where with intensive physical therapy, you can make a lot of progress in recovering. And then these critical periods close. and you can no longer learn a language as easily or no longer heal from your stroke. Her hypothesis is that what psychedelics do is reopen the critical period of learning. And that may account for why we're able to relearn different ways of being, living without your addiction, or learning a perspective that takes you out of your depression. So this has to be tried on humans. They actually are going to do a stroke trial. And they're going to focus on physical movement, lots of, learning new physical movements, and see if this works. This is just getting underway at Johns Hopkins. So that's really exciting work. And Gul Dolan is coming to Berkeley. We recruited her for, there's a psychedelic research center at Berkeley that I co-founded, and she's going to come join our team.
Yeah, I'll ask you about that later. Was there a third theory, or did you get that covered?
Yeah, it's kind of related to the default mode theory. There is a theory of how perception works called predictive processing. You may have heard of it. The idea is that when we're perceiving, when you're looking at me or looking at the stage, you're getting a certain amount of information from your senses, but actually your brain is projecting what it imagines is happening. And your senses all they're doing is correcting the errors. And so we have these beliefs that organize our perception. There's a great example that I talk about in the book. There's something called the rotating mask experiment, where you take one of those hollowed out masks, that you see with the theater, the happy and the sad, and it turns on a turntable, and one side of it is convex and the other side of it is concave. As it turns and the concave side comes into view, something weird happens. It pops out and becomes convex. It hasn't changed. Your brain is so firm in its belief that all faces are convex that it refuses to see a concave face. It just imposes its version of reality on reality. Now, there are two cases of people for whom this doesn't happen. One is schizophrenics, and the other is people on a high dose of psychedelics. So what appears to be happening is that psychedelics softens the higher order beliefs that we use to organize our perception. And those higher ones, that's not a high order belief, that's a mid-level belief that faces are convex. Those higher ones are beliefs about our unworthiness, or can be very negative beliefs in some people. And these beliefs are relaxed on psychedelics. We don't know how. And that relaxation, it goes along with the relaxing the ego idea, creates a space in which new patterns can be formed. Again, these are all still speculative theories. They're really promising. We need to do more research. Basic science research is the hardest to fund. It's very easy to fund. I've got a cure for this, or I've got a cure for that. But that's some of the work we're trying to do at Berkeley, and some of this work is going on in other places too.